Most people think lying is something rare, something dramatic, something done only by manipulative or immoral individuals. That belief itself is a lie we tell ourselves to feel safer in the world. The truth is far more uncomfortable and far more empowering once you accept it. Lying is a human behavior rooted in survival, fear, protection, and desire. From childhood, we learn that telling the full truth can cost us love, safety, approval, or control. So we adjust, we edit, we soften, we conceal. And eventually, these small adjustments become automatic responses rather than conscious decisions. Understanding this is not about becoming cynical, it is about becoming aware. Awareness is the difference between being controlled by human behavior and calmly navigating it. When you understand why people lie, you stop taking deception personally and start seeing patterns clearly. This clarity gives you emotional power, not bitterness, and that is where true confidence begins. The first thing you must understand is that most lies are not malicious. They are defensive. People lie to manage how they are perceived, because perception equals survival in social environments. The brain is wired to protect identity before it protects truth. When someone lies, they are often protecting their image, their status, or their emotional safety rather than trying to harm you. This doesn't excuse deception, but it explains it. Once you understand that lying is often rooted in fear, you stop reacting emotionally and start responding strategically. Fear-based behavior always follows predictable patterns. The calmer you remain, the more visible those patterns become. Emotional reactions cloud perception, while emotional regulation sharpens it. This is why self-awareness must come before situational awareness. If you cannot manage your own emotions, you will never accurately read someone else's behavior. One of the greatest lies people tell is the lie of omission. This is not about saying something false. It is about leaving something out. Omission allows people to technically tell the truth while still shaping reality to their advantage. The brain loves omission because it avoids direct conflict and reduces guilt. People convince themselves they are honest because they didn't explicitly lie, yet they know the missing piece would change everything. Omission is subtle, quiet, and socially acceptable, which is why it is so common. You must learn to listen not just to what is said, but to what is carefully avoided. Silence in certain moments speaks louder than words. When information should naturally appear but doesn't, that absence is information. Awareness means noticing patterns over time, not interrogating individual moments. Truth reveals itself through consistency, while deception relies on selective memory and controlled narratives. Another reason people lie is to maintain control. Control does not always look aggressive. Sometimes it looks charming, calm, or even caring. When someone controls information, they control outcomes. They decide what you know, when you know it, and how you interpret it. This creates an imbalance of power. The human brain is uncomfortable with uncertainty, so when someone gives you partial clarity, you often feel relieved rather than suspicious. This is how subtle control works. It gives you just enough truth to keep you engaged, but not enough to make independent decisions. Emotionally intelligent people resist the urge to rush toward clarity. They are comfortable sitting with uncertainty while gathering more data. Patience is a psychological advantage. The person who can wait without anxiety sees far more than the person who needs immediate answers. People also lie to themselves more than they lie to others. Self-deception is the most dangerous form because it shapes behavior without conscious awareness. When someone believes their own story, their body language becomes more convincing, their tone more natural, and their confidence more persuasive. This is why detecting deception is not about catching nervous tics or exaggerated gestures. It is about noticing emotional incongruence. When words and emotional energy don't align, something is off. Humans are remarkably good at sensing this instinctively, but most people override that instinct because they don't trust themselves. Emotional discipline means learning to respect your internal signals without jumping to conclusions. You observe first. You collect patterns. You remain calm. Truth does not need urgency. Lies often do. Social conditioning teaches us to be polite rather than perceptive. We are taught to ignore discomfort, to give people the benefit of the doubt, even when our instincts warn us. While kindness is valuable, unexamined trust is dangerous. You can be compassionate without being naive. Healthy skepticism is not negativity, it is self-respect. When someone consistently makes you question your own perceptions, that is not confusion, that is manipulation. The strongest people do not confront every lie, they adjust access. They give less emotional exposure, less personal information, less influence. Boundaries are not walls, they are filters. When you control what others have access to, lies lose their power because they no longer shape your decisions or self-worth. Another common lie is the lie of identity. People lie about who they are, not always intentionally, but aspirationally. They present the version of themselves they want to believe in. This is why words should never outweigh behavior. Behavior is costly. It requires energy, time, and consistency. Words are cheap. When someone's actions repeatedly contradict their promises, the truth is in the pattern, not the explanation. Emotionally disciplined individuals do not argue with patterns. They accept them. Acceptance does not mean approval, it means clarity. Once you accept reality as it is, you can decide how to move forward without emotional distortion. This is how you protect your peace while remaining grounded in truth. Lying also thrives in environments where emotions run high. Fear, attraction, anger, and insecurity all weaken perception. When emotions spike, the brain prioritizes relief over accuracy. This is why people believe lies that confirm what they want to hear or fear to lose. Emotional awareness is your strongest defense. When you notice yourself becoming emotionally invested, slow down. Intensity reduces clarity. Calm restores it. The most powerful position is not knowing everything, but knowing yourself. When you are emotionally regulated, deception becomes obvious, not because you are suspicious, but because you are observant. Understanding why people lie is not about becoming guarded or cold. It is about becoming grounded. When you see lying as a human coping mechanism rather than a personal attack, you reclaim control over your reactions. You stop chasing explanations and start trusting patterns. You stop trying to change people and start adjusting your proximity to them. Lies only have power when they influence your emotions, decisions, or self-image. Awareness breaks that influence quietly and effectively. The goal is not to catch every lie, but to live in a way where lies no longer disturb your inner balance. When your emotional center is stable, truth naturally rises to the surface, and deception fades into irrelevance. Once you accept that lying is a natural human behavior, the next step is learning how deception actually shows up in everyday life. Most people look for dramatic signs, but deception is rarely dramatic. It is quiet, measured, and often disguised as normal behavior. The mistake people make is assuming lies look like chaos. In reality, lies often look controlled. They look rehearsed. They look emotionally flat or overly polished. Truth has texture. It has pauses, uncertainty, and emotional fluctuation. When someone is telling the truth, their story breathes. When someone is lying, their story is managed. Recognizing this requires patience and emotional neutrality. If you are too eager to believe or too eager to accuse, you will miss what is right in front of you. Observation without attachment is the skill most people never develop. One of the most subtle forms of deception is over-explanation. When someone gives more detail than necessary, especially without being prompted, it is often an attempt to control your interpretation. The brain associates detail with credibility, so people instinctively add layers to make a story sound solid. But excessive detail can actually be a distraction. Truth does not need reinforcement. It stands on its own. When explanations feel heavy, repetitive, or defensive, pay attention. This does not mean the person is lying in that exact moment, but it does mean they are managing perception. Management is not the same as honesty. Emotionally intelligent listeners don't interrupt these moments. They allow them to unfold. The longer someone talks to protect a narrative, the more inconsistencies quietly reveal themselves. Another common form of deception is emotional misdirection. This happens when someone shifts the emotional focus away from facts and toward feelings. They may express hurt, anger, confusion, or victimhood when confronted with a simple question. This tactic is powerful because humans are wired to relieve emotional tension. When someone becomes emotional, you instinctively soften, apologize, or back off. The original issue disappears. This is not accidental. Whether conscious or not, emotional misdirection protects the lie by overwhelming the conversation. Awareness means staying grounded in the original question. Calm repetition is often enough to expose avoidance. You do not need to argue. You do not need to accuse. You simply return to the point. Truth welcomes clarity. Deception resists it. Pay attention to timing. Truth is consistent across time, while lies require adjustment. When stories subtly change depending on the audience or circumstance, that is a signal. The changes may be small, but they matter. Memory does not alter core facts when something actually happened. When facts shift, it is usually because the story is being edited to fit the moment. Most people miss this because they focus on words instead of structure. Structure is harder to fake. Emotionally disciplined individuals notice when someone remembers how they felt, but forgets what they did, or remembers what others did, but not their own role. Selective memory is not random. It protects identity. Another subtle lie appears as forced certainty. When someone speaks with absolute confidence about situations that naturally involve ambiguity, it deserves attention. Real experiences include doubt, reflection, and nuance. When someone eliminates all uncertainty, they are often trying to close the conversation rather than explore truth. Certainty can be comforting, but it can also be controlling. People who lie often dislike follow-up questions because questions introduce unpredictability. Notice how someone responds when gently challenged. Do they become irritated, dismissive, or condescending? Or do they remain open and curious? Openness is a sign of truth because truth does not feel threatened by examination. Body language is often misunderstood. People think liars fidget or avoid eye contact, but human behavior is far more complex. Stress does not always mean deception, and calm does not always mean honesty. What matters is baseline behavior. Everyone has a natural rhythm. When that rhythm shifts without an obvious external cause, something internal is happening. Maybe it is fear, maybe insecurity, maybe concealment. The goal is not to diagnose, but to notice. Observation without judgment keeps your perception clean. The moment you jump to conclusions, your emotions take over and clarity fades. Calm attention is far more powerful than suspicion. Another form of deception is future projection. This is when someone speaks confidently about what they will do later instead of addressing what they are doing now. The future becomes a shield. Promises replace accountability. The brain finds comfort in potential, so people accept future intentions as evidence of present truth. But behavior lives in the present. Emotionally grounded individuals don't argue about intentions. They watch actions. When actions consistently fail to match promises, the truth is already clear. You don't need closure conversations. You need acceptance. Acceptance is not weakness. It is emotional maturity. People also lie through normalization. They present questionable behavior as common, harmless, or universally accepted. Everyone does this is one of the most effective ways to dissolve accountability. The brain seeks belonging, so when behavior is framed as normal, resistance drops. But morality and integrity are not defined by majority behavior. Just because something is common does not mean it is honest. Awareness means separating social comfort from personal standards. When you know your values, normalization loses its influence. You stop needing consensus to validate your perceptions. Watch how people handle responsibility. Truth tellers can acknowledge their role without collapsing into shame or defensiveness. Deception often shows up as deflection, minimization, or blame shifting. If someone consistently avoids responsibility while highlighting the faults of others, that imbalance is meaningful. Everyone makes mistakes, but not everyone avoids owning them. Ownership requires emotional strength. Avoidance requires narrative control. Over time, the difference becomes unmistakable if you are paying attention. Another subtle deception is inconsistency between words and energy. Someone may say the right things, but the emotional tone feels disconnected. Their words reassure, but their presence creates tension. Humans sense this instinctively, but many ignore it because they cannot logically explain it. You don't need to explain it. Emotional awareness is not about proof, it is about alignment. When something feels off repeatedly, it deserves attention. You don't need to accuse, you need to adjust. Distance is often the most intelligent response to persistent incongruence. Silence can also be deceptive. Withholding response, delaying answers, or avoiding certain topics can be just as revealing as speech. Silence is a strategy when speaking would expose something inconvenient. The key is noticing patterns. Occasional silence is normal. Strategic silence around specific subjects is not. Emotionally aware individuals don't fill these silences with assumptions or excuses. They let them exist. Time is a truth amplifier. When you stop chasing clarity, clarity often arrives on its own. Recognizing deception is not about becoming hypervigilant. Hypervigilance is fear disguised as awareness. True awareness is calm, steady, and patient. It does not rush to label. It observes without attachment. When you are emotionally regulated, you don't need certainty to feel safe. This is why emotionally disciplined people are rarely deceived for long. They don't confront lies aggressively. They simply stop investing in narratives that don't align with reality. Deception thrives on emotional dependence. Independence starves it. As you sharpen your awareness, you may notice something uncomfortable. You will see deception not just in others, but in yourself. You will notice the moments you soften truths, avoid conflict, or protect your image. This is not a failure, it is growth. Self-honesty is the foundation of perceiving honesty in others. When you stop lying to yourself about what you tolerate, what you fear, and what you need, external lies lose their emotional grip. Awareness always starts inward before it moves outward. The goal is not to live suspiciously, but consciously. When you recognize subtle deception, you stop reacting emotionally and start responding intentionally. You don't need to expose lies to reclaim power. You reclaim power by becoming less affected by them. When your self-worth is stable, lies cannot manipulate your emotions. When your standards are clear, lies cannot confuse your decisions. This is where emotional discipline begins to take shape. And this is where deception slowly loses its influence over your life. When you reach this level of awareness, the final shift is internal. It is no longer about identifying lies in others, but about making yourself immune to their emotional impact. Lies only work when they disturb your sense of self, your clarity, or your direction. Emotional discipline is the skill that dissolves that disturbance. It begins with regulating your reactions. When someone lies, manipulates, or withholds truth, your first impulse may be to confront, explain, or seek validation. That impulse is natural, but it gives power away. The moment you feel the urge to prove reality to someone who benefits from denying it, you have already lost emotional leverage. Calm restraint is not silence, it is control. You choose when and how to respond rather than reacting automatically. The strongest people do not chase honesty. They observe behavior and adjust access. They do not need confessions to move on. Closure is not something another person gives you. It is something you decide. When you stop needing answers from people who are committed to distortion, you reclaim your time, energy, and focus. This is where lies lose their grip. They cannot manipulate someone who is not emotionally dependent on being understood. Emotional independence is not detachment from humanity. It is attachment to self-respect. You remain open, but not exposed. You remain kind, but not unguarded. Emotional discipline also means resisting the urge to correct every false narrative. Not every lie deserves your attention. Truth does not require defense when it is grounded in reality. When someone lies about you, about their intentions, or about a situation, your instinct may be to clarify. But clarification often feeds the lie by giving it energy. Silence, paired with consistent behavior, is often the most powerful response. Over time, reality speaks louder than explanations. Those who value truth will notice. Those who prefer illusion will move on. Either outcome protects your peace. To make lies powerless, you must become deeply comfortable with uncertainty. Many people tolerate deception because uncertainty feels worse than false clarity. They would rather accept a comforting story than sit with not knowing. Emotional maturity reverses that pattern. You learn that uncertainty is not danger, it is information. When something does not add up, you don't rush to resolve it. You let it unfold. Time exposes what pressure cannot. When you stop forcing clarity, patterns reveal themselves naturally. This patience is not passive, it is strategic. Self-awareness is your anchor. When you know your values, boundaries, and emotional triggers, manipulation becomes obvious. Lies often target insecurities. If you are unsure of your worth, someone can distort reality to control your behavior. If you are grounded in who you are, distortion fails. This is why personal work matters more than detection skills. You don't need to become an expert in deception if you are solid in yourself. Stability neutralizes manipulation more effectively than confrontation ever could. Another key element of emotional discipline is accepting disappointment without internal collapse. Lies hurt because they violate expectations. When you accept that humans are flawed, fearful, and self-protective, deception becomes less shocking. This does not mean lowering standards. It means releasing unrealistic expectations. You hold people accountable through boundaries, not emotional reactions. Accountability is quiet. It is seen in what you allow and what you walk away from. When your actions align with your values, you don't need emotional validation from others. You also learn to forgive without forgetting. Forgiveness is not about excusing behavior, it is about releasing emotional residue. Carrying anger keeps you connected to the lie. Releasing it frees you. Forgetting, however, erases lessons. Emotional intelligence balances compassion with memory. You remember patterns, not to punish, but to protect. Wisdom is not suspicion, it is discernment. Discernment allows you to engage with the world without being consumed by it. As your discipline strengthens, you stop internalizing other people's distortions. You no longer ask, "Why would they do this to me?" and instead ask, "What does this tell me about them and this situation?" That shift changes everything. It moves you from emotional victimhood to psychological clarity. You don't personalize behavior that was never about you. Most lies are about self-preservation, not attack. When you understand this, resentment fades and understanding replaces it. The final truth is this: the greatest lie people tell is believing that someone else's honesty determines their peace. It does not. Your peace is determined by your ability to remain grounded in reality, regardless of what others choose to present. When you trust your perception, regulate your emotions, and honor your boundaries, lies lose their leverage. They may still exist, but they no longer control you. You see them, you acknowledge them, and you move forward without emotional entanglement. This is the ultimate form of power, not exposure, not confrontation, not winning an argument. Power is clarity without chaos. It is emotional steadiness in a world full of distortion. When you master this, deception becomes background noise rather than a threat. You move through life aware, calm, and unshaken. And in that state, truth has room to breathe, not because everyone tells it, but because you no longer need anything else to feel secure.